After 10 long years, we finally saw the real end of Xenoblade Chronicles X. And while I'm left to wonder how all of this might have played out if the game had been finished back on the Wii U, when the only lore we had besides X was Xenoblade Chronicles 1, I'm still very happy about it all, and excited to say, once again, everything is possible. In fact, the conclusion of X is so open that we have two possible roads the series could take, one involving Xenoblade Chronicles 4, or Y, or Double Crosso, or maybe even Xenosaga Episode 5. But this video is not a prediction or a theory video as usual. Rather, it serves as my personal wishlist for what I'd love to see in a new Xeno-related game. And while some of these wishes may or may not be unrealistic, they all fall under both the protection of "it's just speculation, bro, a man can have his dreams," and the things I expect from a console that could make me consider paying $90 for a physical copy. And yes, I know, some games will cost $80, and I could also buy the cheaper digital version for $70, but that's still not the $60 I'm used to pay. And also, I'm against cutting off the physical market. So obviously, if the next game takes place on a new planet we saw in the definitive edition of Xenoblade X, it could be a game that takes heavy inspiration from Xenoblade X itself, creating a new environment to explore just like Mira with a shit ton of lore and interesting side quests, maybe even multiple instead of just one city to upgrade over time with new Xenospecies that you recruit over the course of the game. Maybe even in a similar style to the colonies of Xenoblade 3, but instead of colonies you, okay, they could still call it colonies actually, but let's just say villages, where different species live. And most importantly, if we get a sequel to X, I want mech combat to be back, but more on this later. Whether the next entry is a numbered or alphabetical game, I'd love to see Scouts coming back, and seeing how Monolith Soft takes the best aspects of both Xenoblade 3 and X, the two games that in my opinion have the most open feeling of their respective worlds, who both tackle the open world aspect in their own ways, and improving upon them. It'd be cool to see a great middle ground between the very important colony-based missions from Xenoblade 3, who tie in great with the story, and almost force you to play them because you want to see all these extra details, but also stretch the game's main story because of how overwhelming their number can be, and between the quote-unquote weaker main story of X with a mostly side-quest based experience that creates its completely own adventure that takes place simultaneously, that does add a lot and lots of cool lore, but also creating more questions and even 10 years later remain unanswered. In short, I'd love to have a Xenoblade X experience with the benefits of Xenoblade 3's colony missions. I refer to the question mark quests, by the way, without getting the fatigue of having to do 3 to 4 of them before progressing the main story. Also, it was a bit that at some point I got too overleveled to gain proper class points from battles during the main quest. It didn't improve this experience that I was playing a version of the game where the cooking bug was still present, and I think this wish of mine is possible if the flow is not interrupted, the story relies more on missions that you unlock via exploring the world and hitting certain requirements rather than following a quote-unquote linear path. One way to have both an open world and a progression in that world alongside the story would be to have the world change and unlocking new tools, such as skulls to help you exploring otherwise unreachable spots, or just downright adding new landmasses, removing obstacles that blocked your path previously. Whatever way they choose, Monolith Soft has proven that they can do both, a truly open world, as well as the classic progression-based path. But obviously, since I'd like to have scales back, I lean more into the big world to explore side, or another concept they might have come up with to make flying with a mech relevant again, without having to limit the player in his ability to roam freely, at least not too much. One reason why I want scales back is actually not the flying, more the fact that Xenoblade X is still the only Xenoblade game where you can board a mech and fight with it. It was a staple in both Xenogears and Xenosaga, and it would be cool to see more and improved takes on such systems in the future. Giant mechs in JRPGs and anime with a sci-fi setting are just as important as spaceships in other sci-fi media, and while I love the sci-fantasy approach of the numbered trilogy, it's no secret that the series overall leaned more and more towards the sci-fi direction over time. And every game has at least one heavily sci-fi-ish endgame, making all Xenoblade games technically sci-fi in their core. I would love both a sci-fantasy or full-on sci-fi experience as in X, and also even a full-on fantasy approach, which could be possible, given that in an interview it was mentioned that the next Xeno game is going to be something completely new, but we will see what Mr. Takahashi has come up with next. If the game turns out to be a more or less direct sequel to Xenoblade X, it would be incredibly cool to have a party that will over time contain Alma, Lynn, and Al, as well as being able to discover the other optional party members of X somewhere in this new world to see how they have continued their life. For example, HB could be the new commander, and an older, retired Vandam that is still kicking ass could be beside him. Alexa being the leader in a new line of scale productions or collecting data via training battles, maybe even providing the challenge mode of this game. Both chilling in a dojo, Fry having retired and working in a self-founded bar, and obviously a follow-up to the cliffhanger of the Yelf questline. That is still not solved after 10 years. Simple things such as seeing a grown-up Lynn, seeing how the several different species of X have become a united culture that expand and evolve on a new homeland to create the beginning of a new history, and generally seeing familiar faces in a new light would honestly warm my heart. Despite all this, I do not want another Avatar in the game, which might seem counterproductive because I low-key want a sequel like this. Actually, Cross would make it more or less impossible to make a proper follow-up, since they are an important companion in the team, and also fully customizable both in gear as well as in their appearance. While these problems could have simply been resolved by killing Cross off, I'm actually glad they didn't, because honestly I'm a bit tired by this trope. Or maybe the death of my OC in the Transformers DS video game secretly traumatized me.
Right. I see Cybertron. It's all around us. Here on Earth. Is this our new home? The humans need us. And we need them. Protect them. And they will protect us.
Your name will be remembered throughout the ages for the sacrifice you have made here today. We will never forget. I will never forget.
But what if they pulled the same move Pokemon did in Gold and Silver and turned Cross into a super boss for the post-game? Having him be the new hero that followed Ale's steps, being one of the first explorers of this new world, who then, just like Al, mysteriously disappeared. Make them wear an armor that makes it impossible to decipher both their appearance as well as their gender, give them the gimmick that they change their gear and fighting style mid-combat multiple times, and top it off with a second phase scale combat. Boom! A neat reference that doesn't contradict lore, is fully optional, and makes sense in the way it could be used. And come on, the Avatar doesn't even talk much until in battle. They are basically red but on a whole different planet. It goes without saying that a real protagonist with a backstory beyond memory loss, especially in the Xeno series, is much more interesting, and that the characters and the writing is one of the big reasons why the story of these games are just so damn cool, especially Xenoblade 3 and Xenosaga. So yeah, other than a customizable party member like Poppy Cutie Pie, I don't really want to see this again. Huh, now that I think about it, why not make Cross that unlockable customizable character to begin with? With them being an Mimiuit and having access to a way to change their appearance in-universe, it would be easy to just use their default appearance in the trailer and then give the player a character creator to change their appearance and modify their gear. This would be a hell lot of extra effort, I imagine, just for a funny little reference, but it'd be very cool. Even though the chance is high, this scenario ends up as DLC instead of main game content. But as cool as all of this sounds in my head, there are still problems with a direct sequel and my wishes. First off, while the resources of the people on the White Whale 2 are surely low, and this can be used as an excuse for why they have to gather material and don't have flying scales anymore. They had flying scales in the end cutscene of Xenoblade X. They were not destroyed. And also the flight pack has already been invented in X. The story that tied into it was already resolved, so that kind of problem and or struggle would only be present in terms of gameplay, because the player has to acquire the license to board a skull or unlock one somehow else. And unless the way the skulls are unlocked is, hey, we found a skull, but unfortunately his flight pack is broken, this can't work out with the way Xenoblade X progressed. Also, the Xenoblade games are known to be very open for every newcomer. Unlike Xenosaga, you need no knowledge of the previous games to immerse yourself in whatever game is your entry point. And then it lets you explore the other games in whichever order you like. Due to this, the references to Xenoblade 1 and 2 and Xenoblade 3 are either subtle or rare enough, and mostly within Future Redeemed, because they want to be careful what and how they present certain things. I witnessed this myself when my brother started the series with Xenoblade 3, and we all have seen how the sales of Xenoblade 2 went up after the Xenoblade 3 launch. It's just a great concept that works out, really. Therefore, they can't include too many spoiler things in the Xenoblade X sequel, I believe. However, the biggest spoiler I could think of that should be left out is Elna's true form, and then you could argue about El, his Ares and some other things, but even then, it wouldn't be impossible to include them in the dreams I've mentioned earlier. But most likely, the next Xenoblade game will star a new cast that may or may not encounter the crew of the White Whale 2. That was a nice rhyme. And maybe the descendants of other familiar faces show up too, but it's also entirely possible that everyone including the main characters from X becomes an NPC. Still though, I think it's more likely than the scenario of the XC1 and 2 cast members being playable in Xenoblade 3. I do think that it is more likely that we get a new Xenosaga entry before we get a port of the original trilogy. This is because originally the plan was that the second half of Xenosaga was meant to be experienced by a whole new cast of characters. I gotta be honest, this video is very spontaneous and my only source is a user in a German Xenoblade Discord who told me this a few times. So it'd be easy to tie that in here. And we all... And we always got a new game before an old one re-released. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 happened before the definitive edition of the first game. Xenoblade 3 happened before Xenoblade X, definitive edition. And I think it will be the same with Xenosaga. What's interesting is that while both X definitive edition and Future Redeemed end with something approaching an Earth-like planet, said planet is different in both scenarios. And oddly enough, the planet in the game with a shit ton of Xenosaga references in the end has a planet that misses the ring from the planet Cosmos is floating towards in Xenosaga 3, while the planet the White Whale 2 approaches has a ring. Now, this could be the same case as with Alwa's Key in the original Xenoblade, that is later replaced by a red Aegis crystal necklace. Or, that's my theory, they just want to have multiple options to continue with. As far as I know, Bandai Namco still holds the rights of Xenosaga, so they either would have to acquire the rights or work together with them to do anything related to the series. But correct me in the comments if I got anything wrong here. Also, if they want to retcon the planet having a ring, why not include it just now? I have read a theory online that the Saturn is very important to the Demiurge in Gnosticism, and Xenoblade is basically entirely built around the concept of Gnosticism. And a ring around the planet basically means that there is still the influence of a false god surrounding it. So the planet at the end of Future Redeemed is actually entirely free from clouds now, and the lack of a ring symbolizes this, while the story of Xenoblade X is far from finished. The way it is now, they can do both. A game where Cosmos lands on a new planet and starts the next arc of Xenosaga, probably as a character that gets a new identity as she is found by someone who loves to repair robots and in the process changes her appearance as it was done in the past anyway. Plus, given that Cosmos now has the soul of Mary Magdalena within her, she actually can evolve as a character and become more human, possibly even exploring the psychology of a being with an artificial body in a world mostly inhabited by biological creatures. Which, by the way, would also be interesting to see in a Xenoblade X sequel, because while they have the Lifehold unit to recreate their biological bodies, the humans still are inside their MIMs in the end. Except for Elma, El, the other El, Celica, and so on, of course. Wait. That was a long paragraph. Where was I? Yes. So it could go both ways. That we get a new Cosmos that gets a new name and appearance, basically becoming a whole new character, and also having a new crew of characters that's descendant or are part of the team from the White Whale 2 that now explores the new planet like they did with Mira. But it could also be from the perspective of inhabitants from this planet that have their own struggle to deal with. And somehow both parties end up finding each other over the course of the game. Thing is, both endings of the numbered trilogy and X epilogue leave so much possibilities open without even considering that it all could take place before anyone even arrives on this planet, or in a time skip several years later, with both scenarios having a chance of a big colony ship that crash lands on that planet and heavily influences the evolution of that place. I have still not finished Xenogears, by the way, but this is what I predict what might have happened in the intro. Man, Xenogears is so cool. It plays really aged, but it is every Xenoblade and Xenosaga game ever. So yeah, these are my thoughts about that, and who knows, maybe both options are taken, that is also a possibility, or nothing else, or it's just taking place in yet another universe that will lead to the same ending, that the people find the new homeland. The combat is the most exciting part for me in every game, and my favorites are definitely from Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade X. The latter being finally smoothed out with this simple yet effective instant recharge feature. Lovely. But the scale combat could get some rework to feel a bit more interesting in my opinion. Maybe a bit more lean towards the ground combat, but that is not what I want to discuss, because I don't really have an idea about that yet. What I have an idea for, however, is the way ground combat could work. This series has established two things so far: having 9 party members on screen at the same time, and the ability to switch between them. The series also had a system in Tornor where every party member was basically a small squad of characters rather than an individual one, which is also the case in the main game of Xenoblade 2, but there they are mostly equipables for your characters. So, as I said, I'd like to have a game that's more like Xenoblade Chronicles X again, which would include hunting down very large monsters. This, in-universe, would require teamwork. So while it's totally possible for 4 people, and max no less, to take down a big monkey, there are larger scale missions we've seen in the cutscene before, such as the operation to get back to the wild whale or fighting against the Ganglion when they attack NLA. The Nemesis fights are also scenarios where the entire squad teams up in smaller teams to take down a huge threat, even though it is left to our imagination how that would look from the in-universe perspective. Basically, if another Xenoblade X scenarios happens, I'd love to have a big team. The total party size could be reduced to 3 again though. I said I'd expect a lot from a $90 game, but I still want to be realistic. It's Nintendo we are talking about here. However, just like in Tornor, every party member that takes a slot is actually made of 3 party members. We call the slots squads in this case, meaning we have one leader that leads a group with 2 others. And instead of just switching between the squads themselves, you can also switch the leader of said squad as well, effectively having 9 active party members at once, which opens up room for the new Rare Blade heroes, whatever they call optional party members this time. In order to add spice and more control over the NPCs, you could also assign roles to each squad, one being for support, one debuffing the enemy by toppling, etc., and the obligatory attack squad. Tactics like pulling aggro or such would work too, of course, and by strategically placing tanks in each squad, you might be able to keep your party alive easier by trading the aggro around easier. Depending on which formation each squad has, they would get certain benefits, similar to the bonuses of blades in Xenoblade 2, and different tactics and roles you could assign them. And also, each squad would fill their own group gauge. Yep, I want this thing back so badly, because I hate how Xenoblade 3 and Xenoblade X handles reviving party members. So, it goes without saying that I also want this thing to be used for chain attacks too as well. But in this system, chain attacks would be performed by the squads that filled their own respective group charge. So basically every squad has their own chain attack. And again, depending on how the squad is built beforehand, the available tactics and attacks change. Like, for example, Uni, Nor and Lance from one squad, and they choose the tactic to lower the enemy's ether defense, proceeding to use some arts and then performing another attack like in Xenoblade 3. However, in order to extend the chain, you gotta switch to another squad, who also filled their group gauge. Or you just use another tactic from the same squad, but if you do this, it would cost 2 units of the chain, was it called chain meter actually? I have absolutely no idea. I never play these games in English. Maybe my terms are confusing, but what I mean to say is you have 3 slots in a gauge, and if you use one on the same squad in a row, two times in a row, then you will lose 2 of these units instead of just 1, because it fatigues a squad more if it has to do all the work alone, just like in real life, if you have to do a group assignment in school. Essentially making it so that you potentially have 9 tactics you can use at the time, but only if all performed by switching between the squads. This sounds complicated, but if done right, a system like that can be learned and mastered, and hopefully not become too repetitive as it is in Xenoblade 3, at least in my opinion. But yeah, the same things you'd also have with Skells, who can now once again be customized with different parts to change your arts and also of course tactics. So if you think controlling a party of 9 people sounds cool, how about a party of 9 freaking Skells?
Oh yeah, work it, baby.
Imagine hovering around something the size of the Suforg, or no, something the size of a Titan. And you have a group of 9 mechs surrounding it that blasting it from all sides and...
It would be so awesome. It would be so cool.
Now, obviously this is all just a theory, and it has to be worked out, but yeah, this is pretty much my dream scenario of a new experimental system now. If we are talking about an old but reimagined system, I'd probably like it to be more like Xenoblade 2 again. This game has my favorite battle system, not just of Xenoblade but in general. Everything builds up upon each other. Auto attacks charge up arts, arts charge up special attacks charge up combos, combos charge up chain attacks. It's so satisfying. And I know many prefer the Torna battle system, but I have played so little of Torna in comparison that I don't even know the differences anymore. So I don't even try to explain. That aside, I'm a big fan of chaining attacks to each other. If I could choose, I would prefer auto-attack hit-based recharge like in Xenoblade 2 over time-based recharge from Xenoblade 1 and X. And if we get back to over time, then I would want to have something like the instant recharge from the definitive edition of X. But I do think this might be unlikely, since in X that was just slapped on the existing system to improve it. Every system that follows now can be built new from the ground, circumventing these problems from occurring in the first place, but yeah, that's just my guess. Time-based recharge could be used for some scout parts though, or for scouts in general to simulate their overheating, balance them, and give the player a reason to switch to ground-based combat, or to combine both in general. Combining the two is somewhat possible in X actually, but usually one is better depending on the situation. Side note, if for some bizarre reason they ever introduce spaceship combat into the series, can they please steal inspire it from the battle system of Star Trek Online? That'd be cool. And it works a bit like Scouts actually. Your attack options and other abilities depend on the equipped items of your ship, and your pilots and commanders in charge of certain parts of the ship determine extra abilities, such as accelerating movement speed, giving you an extra shield for a limited time, increasing torpedo damage, and so on. This will never happen anyway, but I just wanted to sneak this in because I really like ship combat from this game, and I have actually never watched Star Trek in my life. I would love to see both the species from the Numbered Trilogy as well as the species from X returning and interacting with each other. It would be just so cool. I love the Orphans. I want one as a party member, with a Gatling gun. I love the Machina. I love the Blades. Not just because, heck, mix in new species and we'd have endless possibilities of a diverse and colorful cast, both in terms of party members and NPCs. They could be thrown into different situations than before. This would work best if the game takes place in a world where all those species are already made themselves comfortable and started building new towns and such to explore their new cultures and conflicts and such. But whatever setting they choose, it would work out surely. Oh, and could the lizards and turkeys have potential party member candidates as well? That'd be awesome. Because I love lizards. I love humanoid lizards. I have bought some snake men that I still gotta paint. As for pre-established places and regions, we've had enough of those in Xenoblade 3, I think. and they ended up doing way less with them than I hoped for. And all the references in Xenoblade X are now more or less confirmed to be absolutely irrelevant. Which is okay, considering both Xenoblade 3 and X were whole new games, and all the people on Mira and in Ionios were doing was using these places that have zero significance for them, historically speaking at least. This does contradict a bit with other things I've mentioned, I know, but first, I don't expect if actually any of this to happen, and second, it's one thing if they put in Alchemath and Colony 9, as well as a city named after Garfont. It is a whole different story to put in the arm and sword of the Mechonis. So, I don't know if you know this, but Tatsu's father was on a journey in Xenoblade X. Which means that during the dematerialization of Mira, yeah. I secretly hoped that he would either become a party member in the next sequel, or that we encounter him during the epilogue of the definitive edition. That would have been a bit more interesting than the two random NPC stretch quests in my opinion. But yeah, as it stands now, he is dead. Unless he becomes the protagonist of this game's DLC, or at least a party member there. And yes, I know this is random as hell, but imagine how funny it would be to have a Nopon as the protagonist, while having a great story that expands on a very, very important thing, such as the Ghost or the Conduit, for example. They could even reference the text of the Siren action figure box, where Muimui says that there was an ancient text found that he couldn't decipher, and then make that part of the whole story where they find ancient relics and text that somehow drops massive lore about the replacement of the Lemagentum system from Xenosaga, or perhaps even Klaus or the Saviorite rebels, Dimitri's previous lives and whatnot. A DLC could also be used to answer a few more questions about Mira, because again, there's just so much stuff we didn't get a proper answer for after all this time. And I hope I'm just not oblivious because I mostly rushed the definitive edition because I wanted to see the new story content. They may or may not have put in other new side quests aside from the new Affinity missions, but given that those don't really answer much more, I doubt these would cover things that we'd be interested in anyway, but be free to correct me in the comments. Also, the biggest change in the definitive edition of the first game, aside from Future Connect of course, was that we've got the battle arena and Aegis's core crystal. Did I just call Alvis Aegis? Oh my god. In general though, I'd be more happy if this was not DLC but part of the main game. So far Monolith did an excellent job to justify another $20 or was it $30 price by giving you a whole new game, each on top of extra content for the main game. But I'm not a fan of progressing stories via DLC, to be honest. And the only reason I am willing to pay for Xenoblade is because I love this series. Stuff like the epilogue and Future Connect are fine. These are old games that provide you with cool new content. And the DLCs that we did got so far were really worth the money. Maybe I'm just too old-fashioned in that regard. And as of now, yeah, that would be my wishlist for things I'd like to see in the future. Not necessarily in the next game, but in the future of the series, yeah. What would be your ideas? Let your wildest ideas flow and craft your very own Xenoblade fanfiction if you want to, but keep the limits in sight. Until then, I wish you a great morning, mittag, whatever, and goodbye. Please, please, for the love of God, please reveal Mithra's child. My headcanon is that she is a girl who gets the hairstyle of Pyra's beta design, similarly how Niall repurposed Neo's beta design. But Yeah, I just want to know how Mithras Child looks. It doesn't even need to be in the game. Drop an artwork or anything. This is just as frustrating as not getting an answer on the Yelp side quest to me.